Okay, so I've cleaned up seam lines and re-scribed the panel lines and put the rivet detail back in. I didn't use a rivet wheel because the rivets are so far spaced apart. The biggest wheel I got is a millimetre. It might have come close, but there wasn't a lot anyway, so I just used a needle and put the ones in that were missing. It wasn't many, so I've jacked up the top wing like I said I was with plastic card, and I've done a dry fit. It fits, even though that you can see that piece is sticking out. It doesn't matter because that section of the fuselage sits on top of the wing there. It won't sit on top of that plastic card, so that'll work. I've painted inside of the cowl. I've started painting the engine up, so I've used AK Extreme Metal, just steel, to paint it. I've got to paint the casing on the front. It's like a blue-grey colour, and I'll paint in the details for the wiring and the push rods. So I made I made the prop up just to fit it, because when I mentioned about I had to sand this back, what I did was I sanded the resin engine back and I sanded this back. So I did both of them and just kept doing a bit at a time and checking with the cowl on until I was happy that it's sitting where it's supposed to be, which is about there, going by images. So that's all done. I'm not putting all that on yet, I'll wait. I'll fit the wing to the fuselage, clean that up, and then I'll start adding everything else on there. Okay, getting somewhere finally. So I've got the stabilizers on. They actually fit on alright, which was amazing. I've put in the clear parts on the wing tips. They needed a bit of filler around them. I've got to mask them off before I start priming and painting. Also, there's lights or clear parts going here, but I'm just gonna paint them after and put a bit of crystal clear in there, and that'll dry up like a light. Just as easy as putting in a clear part and masking it off. So I got to clean up in here. It didn't front fit alright, but the back wasn't so crash hot, so I've got to clean that up. The seam there and one side had a bit of a lip, so I'm going to have to, when I sand it back, I'm going to have to continue back a bit so I don't have a step. So I'll do that next, clean that up. When that's done, then I can start looking at putting some primer down. Okay, so I've painted up the combing above the instrument panel. I used NATO black. I've put in the gun sight and the clear part that sits in there. I just glued the clear part on with some crystal clear. I've cleaned up under here. It was a bit of a job. When I said I had a lip, it was on one side, it was pretty much all the way along, so I just went at it aggressively with a coarse sanding stick. I went back about that far to keep it, like I said, without the step, and then I just used different grades of sanding sponge and cleaned it up. Then I re-scribed the panel lines and put the rivets back in, and I also cleaned up where the bottom section meets the top section of the fuselage, that section. as well. I've masked the canopy up. I use the mask I got 2 sets of masks. I've had these so long I don't even remember what's what, but the ones on the side didn't fit properly. There was a bit of a gap, so I just used some Tamiya tape. Unfortunately, it's going to sit perfectly. So I'm going to glue that in shortly. And then I'll mask off the cockpit area so I can prime. The canopy's movable, so I'll paint it off the aircraft and just put it on at the end. I've painted up the engine. As mentioned, you only see it from the front, so I'm ready now to glue that in. When I glue it in, I'm going to have to align it because it's not a positive fit anywhere, so I've got to put that on and then try and centralize it. So that will be my next job. And once that's on, I can mask around the cowling there, and I've got to mask up the tail wheel section. I've masked up the main gear bays, and then finally I can start laying down some primer. Alright, all primed up. Primed it with AK's primer microfiller, the grey. I'm going to use this splatter template and white primer, and just random go over the fuselage and the wings with it. After I do that, then I'm going to pre-shade panel lines and riveting with black, and then be ready for paint. Alright, so I finished with the splatter template. I've done my pre-shading. So it's time to put down that glossy sea blue. When I bought paint for it, I couldn't get any brands that I would normally use, so I've had to get something different. This is Outlaw Paints. I think it's an Australian company. I've never used it before, but I've just did a test on an old wing of a model to see what it looks like. And no issue with the paint, obviously. I didn't think there would be. Usually all these bottled paints, lacquer paints, are good to go straight out of the bottle, but I always thin anyway. I like a really thin paint when I'm airbrushing, so time to lay it down.